Hey, what's up everyone? This is Skulm, and in today's video we're going to look at Ring of Mendeln Summon Necromancer Season 2 build. Now, all of you probably know that Blizzard has fixed the Bone Prison glitch, which made us proc Ring of Mendeln on demand. Now, instead of Bone Prison, we're going to be using another ability, which is Bone Spear. Bone Prison was glitched to the extent that it would grant nearly 100% chance to lucky hit and trigger Ring of Mendeln on demand. Now, we're going to completely drop Bone Prison in this build and we're going to be using Bone Spear. Bone Spear has a really good inherent lucky hit chance, a 50% by default, and with some additional gear, itemization, paragon boards and skills, we're going to make this one work for Season 2. So, let's go! Now, I first want to start off with the Vampiric Powers. We're going to look at the Accursed Touch here. Now, on lucky hits, this applies, of course, Vampiric Curse, but most importantly, the Accursed Souls deal 200% increased damage. So, I will recommend we use this one for sure. Metamorphosis, I really like it. I think this is gonna be great in Nightmare Dungeons, but also against the Uber bosses, this is a surefire way to apply Vampiric Curse, and it grants us unstoppable every time we evade. So, I'm currently sticking with the Metamorphosis one, but this might be subject to change, so take this with a grain of salt. Also, Coven's Fangs, I'm currently using it in Nightmare Dungeons. I think this is gonna be great for killing monsters, especially with Grasping Veins aspect, since your Corpse Tendrils is a stun, and you have Decrepify, which is another crowd control that slows enemies. But this might also change. We can get the CDR, the ultimate CDR reduction one, so I'm not so sure, but I'm recommending this one for now. Feed the Coven is another Vampiric power that is definitely needed for this build, because our minions now have up to 60% chance to restore 10 primary resource to us and grant 10% damage increase for 4 seconds. This is really good to counteract the new Shadow Blight change. The old Shadow Blight used to grant us and our minions 10% increased damage. They have completely eliminated that in the new reworked version of Shadow Blight. So this Vampiric power offers us some sort of compensation. And finally, we play Prey on the Weak, which grants us a damage modifier against vulnerable enemies. And also, this is again a damage increase, and I like it. Again, some of these might change, but for now, I recommend we stick to these 5. And this is the endgame version, so I have selected Shaco here. But before obtaining your Shaco, you can play with lucky hit while you have a barrier, max life, intelligence, helm, and you can put the explosive mist into that helm. You can put blood getter into the boots, and on gloves you can play with inner calm, which is the aspect that grants you up to 30% damage increase when you're standing still. Anyway, right now we're gonna assume we have Shaco, so play with Shaco because it grants us 20% damage reduction. On the chest armor, we play with Vicious Aspect, which grants us 2 more skeletal mages. For the affixes, we want damage reduction, max life, physical damage, and damage, because Ring of Mendeln scales based on our damage, so we want as much of physical damage and damage increase as possible. On gloves, we want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, all stats and intelligence, and we're gonna be playing with Blood Getter's aspect, which grants us +2 skeletal warriors. On the pants, we want aspect of Shielding Storm with damage reduction, intelligence, all stats, and plus ranks of Blood Mist, because we want to use Blood Mist as often as possible. The Summon Necromancer Mendeln version actually is some sort of Infinimist build in terms of, like, at least for defensive, from the defensive perspective, it actually uses Blood Mist a lot and it can use it frequently. So this plus ranks of Blood Mist on pants definitely helps us with further cooldown reduction on Blood Mist. On boots, we play with aspect of Explosive Mist, because we're not going to be playing with Corpse Explosion on our skill bar. This is Corpse Tendrils. As you notice, we don't have Corpse Explosion. So these boots will make us cast Blood Mist, which will explode corpses through Corpse Explosion, which helps us in the long run because we will play with Blighted Corpse Explosion. I'll come to that later. On boots, we want movement speed, intelligence, dodge chance, and all stats. Now, I think dodge chance is a very underrated affix. Not only it helps your minions, but also it can definitely help you in especially super high tier nightmare dungeons. If you dodge a brutal attack, well, you just dodged it. You don't take any damage at all. So this is a great affix to play as a Summon Necromancer, in my honest opinion. On the weapon, we're gonna be using a wand because wands have inherent lucky hit chance. We're putting aspect of Grasping Veins on the weapon because we're gonna be playing with Blighted aspect on the amulet for its bonus damage multiplier. Now for the wand, we want critical strike damage, intelligence, all stats, and then damage affected by shadow damage over time enemies. So our Blighted Corpse Explosion is a shadow dot. And also we're going to be playing with aspect of Ultimate Shadow on the offhand. I'll come to that later, which makes our Bone Storm a shadow ability. Again, that's really good for the Shadow Blight procs. But when we have the Corpse Explosion Blighted Ground, that will definitely help us deal further damage to the targets that are affected to it. Okay? So on the amulets, we play Blighted aspect. This gets a bonus because we place it on the amulet, which grants us a lot of damage every time Shadow Blight's key passive reaches 10 stacks. So when Shadow Blight applies damage, when it damages enemies 10 times, we get the Blighted aspect damage bonus. On the amulet, we definitely want cooldown reduction, movement speed, damage, and ranks of the amplified damage passive. Ring of Mendeln speaks for itself. I don't think it needs any type of introduction. This is a great unique item for the Summon Necromancer because on your lucky hits, all of your minions will have an explosion aura around them and they will deal physical damage. This damage scales based on your damage, not your minions' damage. That's why we're gonna have a dedicated Paragon board just for this ring. On the ring, we play with Conceited Aspect, because it grants us a damage increase whenever we have a barrier active. We get a barrier through the aspect of Shielding Storm, so when we pop Bone Storm, anytime it damages an enemy, we get a barrier. So when we get that barrier, we have a damage increase. On the ring stats, we want crit chance, crit damage, lucky hit chance, and vulnerable damage. We're gonna be using an offhand here, and we're gonna be running with aspect of Ultimate Shadow to make Bone Storm transfer into a shadow ability, which helps us trigger Blighted aspects way more frequently, okay? And as the affixes, we want cooldown reduction, crit chance, lucky hit chance, and all stats. On our limited action bar, we're gonna be playing with Raised Skeleton, obviously. We want Bone Storm, we want Blood Mist, we want Corpse Tendrils, Decrepify, and Bone Spear. Now, you might ask me, well, Skulm, there is a unique item, the new unique item, that makes your minions cast curses. Now, I have not seen this unique item. I have no access to any type of PTR. I don't think there is any PTR, so I didn't test this item. We don't know the stats of this item as well, and I'm not sure how these curses work. It says your minions have a 3 to 7% chance to curse enemies. Enemies affected by at least one of your curses take 70% increase overpower damage from you. So, do these minions cast Iron Maiden and Decrepify even if you don't have points allocated to them, or do they only cast the curse that has been placed in your action bar? I have no idea how this works, okay? If this item turns out to be a great item, then you may consider playing it. However, I am highly skeptical against this item because it will not be as good as the Decrepit Aura Heart from Season 1. If you remember, in Season 1, we had the Decrepit Hearts, which would grant us a Decrepify Aura that would apply Decrepify in everything around us, and that was a surefire way to get rid of Decrepify from your limited action bar. Right now we're going to be using Decrepify manually to make sure we have all of its effects applied whenever we want. Alright, so we're going to be running Skeletal Reapers, and we want to make sure they create corpses. We're going to be running with Shadow Mages, and we want them to fire an additional Shadow Bolt every 4th attack. We're sacrificing the Iron Golem for increased 30% increased crit damage. Now, after the critical strike bucket changes, this may be mediocre at best, I'm not so sure, but I think it still will not hurt us that much. It grants us a base damage, and up to the critical strike threshold, the damage works fine. After the threshold, it becomes additive, as you guys know. But I'm choosing to keep this one anyway. So, let's talk about the skills. Put 2 points into anything here, because you're not going to be even having that in your action bar. Then, we're using Bone Spear for the lucky hit to trigger Ring of Mendeln. This is our new Bone Prison. I have selected Supernatural Bone Spear. If we think this is an overkill, I may take away 2 points from here and put them into somewhere else. But for now, I want to play Supernatural Bone Spear to make sure we have vulnerability applied. And base Bone Spear is more than enough for us to trigger lucky hits. Again, we just wanted to trigger lucky hits to proc Ring of Mendeln. That's it. Hued Flesh, non-negotiable. Put 5 points into Blood Mist to reduce the cooldown even further, so that you can use it more frequently. Again, this is some sort of Infinimist defensive perspective here. We want to enter as much Blood Mist as possible. And we definitely want Ghastly Blood Mist upgrade, because whenever we pop it, it will leave behind a corpse, which will then be automatically exploded by the aspect of Explosive Mist. Alright? So, we have Corpse Explosion, Enhanced Corpse Explosion, and then Blighted Corpse Explosion. That aspect of Explosive Mist will trigger Blighted Corpse Explosion, so we will have a Vile Miasma dealing shadow damage over time to enemies that stand in it. Okay? That will help us for the Shadow Blight stacks as well. 3 points into Skeletal Warrior Mastery, 3 points into Grim Harvest, and 3 points into Fueled by Death. Now, you might say, well, Skulm, you only pop Corpse Explosion through the aspect of Explosive Mist, so aren't these a waste? No, they are not. When you cast Raise Skeleton, that also consumes a corpse, which will grant you Grim Harvest buff and Fueled by Death buff. So whenever you press Raise Skeleton, you get the benefit from these passives. I have selected Death's Embrace for the damage reduction, and I'm predicting that we're gonna be having a lot of face-to-face time with the Uber bosses. If that turns out to be wrong, then we may switch to Death's Reach, depending on the situation, so keep this option available. But right now, I am suggesting we go with Death's Embrace. Definitely 3 points into Amplify damage, because we're going to be running with Decrepify. And of course, we play Decrepify into Abhorrent Decrepify, which helps us reduce our cooldowns even faster. In order to trigger this, you need lucky hits, okay? So lucky hits against Decrepified targets will reduce your cooldowns. Will have a chance to reduce your cooldowns at least. 3 points into Skeletal Mage Mastery, that's a given. You play Corpse Tendrils, Enhanced Corpse Tendrils, and Plate Corpse Tendrils for the vulnerable application. Again, if this turns out to be an overkill, we may consider switching. But right now, it is looking okay. 2 points into Necrotic Carapace, because we have Skeletal Reapers. When they create corpses from their attacks, this will trigger Necrotic Carapace, which will fortify you for 4% of max life. Because they reworked this ability, it does not fortify you based on your base life anymore. It fortifies you for your max life, which is pretty good. Okay, so we have 1 point in Reaper's Pursuit and 3 points into Gloom. Now, this is one of the best options available in this Shadow branch over here. It's not a super big deal, but I think it's still decent to take. 3 points into Inspiring Leader. This is really good because now it is buffed. The attack speed bonus triggers after 2 seconds. It used to be 4 seconds, now it's 2 seconds. Both us and the minions gain attack speed thanks to Inspiring Leader. 3 points into Death's Defense. This is reworked. Now all minions will get the previous Death's Defense ability baked into them by default. The new version also adds further tankiness to our skeletons. They gain armor and resistance to elements this way. Our ultimate ability is Bone Storm. Again, through the Blighted aspect, actually not Blighted, Ultimate Shadow aspect, we're going to transform Bone Storm into a Shadow ability, which will help us gain benefit from the Shadow Blight key passive. Now, the old Shadow Blight key passive would grant us and our minions 10% damage increase. The reworked version no longer provides that damage bonus, so we still take this, but just for this Blighted aspect. We just want it for the Blighted aspect, okay? That's important to mention. Again, this is more suitable for an Infinimist build now, because it synergizes better with the shadow damage over time bonuses you have, alright? I am not going into super detail in Paragon boards. I am going to link this build in the video description below, so you can check it out. Make sure to let me know in the comments or join my Discord. Anyway, we start with Corporeal here on the first glyph. Corporeal has been reworked, so it provides bonus to all these damage, or any magic node here. Most importantly, these magic damage nodes. And it also grants us 10% increased physical damage. Ring of Mendeln is physical damage. Second board, we go Bloodbath into Exploit. We take Hardened because we deal damage while fortified. And you know, Exploit is decent because there are so many dexterity nodes around it, so we will deal extra damage that way. The third board is Scent of Death Imbiber. Now, if you take all the willpower nodes around the Imbiber glyph, you will take up to 106.9% damage increase while healthy. This is decent, so definitely take that. And then we're gonna go up to Flesh Eater. We place Amplify into the Flesh Eater glyph node because we're gonna be running Decrepify, and it actually grants 150% bonus to all magic nodes within range. Targeted is really good because that's plus damage to elites, so Amplify buffs that, and we also play Erudite for some extra resistance to elements, right? So we then switch to Wither board. We place the Essence glyph here to get some extra damage, obviously, but most importantly, on the Wither board, you want to take Knowing Darkness, and you want to take these magic nodes that grant you further damage to elites, alright? So then the sixth board is Cult Leader, and we place the Dead Razor glyph here. This is a non-negotiable because these rare nodes also provide some big buffs to your minions. And lastly, we're going into Hulking Monstrosity, and we're going to place the Scourge glyph here. Now, it's decent, but I had to sacrifice 2 points from Scent of Death. Alright guys, this is how the Summon Ring of Mendeln build is looking for Season 2. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think? What would you change? And if you want to dive into deeper conversations, make sure to join my Discord. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.